Hey everyone, hey non-programmers out there, hey people who don't know any programming but want to learn programming. I'm going to teach you programming using the Dart programming language. I'm going to explain some concepts that you need to know for really everything that you're going to learn here. And we're going to come away with something that you can show off to your friends, something that does something. Like you can type in some code and run the code and it does something and you can demo that to people. I think if you're able to do that, you're off to a good start. So the trick to learning programming, my advice, don't waste your time with learning, like taking a full-blown course or reading a book end to end, and then trying something out. What I recommend doing is learn a few concepts and try to write apps yourself. Try to write something functional. It could be something really stupid, but just try something that actually works, because you learn by doing. It's like cooking, right? You don't learn to cook by learning a gazillion techniques. You learn a few basic concepts and techniques, and then you cook something simple, and then you repeat the process. Same thing with learning a language. You don't learn a language by taking a year of courses and then trying to finally have a conversation. You take a language course and you start speaking immediately, and that's where the real learning comes. So again, don't like learn, avoid trying to kind of learn every concept under the sun. And there's a lot of courses out there. There's a lot of like YouTube videos and free courses online out there teaching you programming. And the trick is like, don't just sit there for hours like watching that stuff. Just learn a few concepts and then try something out yourself. So programming, the success in programming comes from tinkering and being curious and trying stuff out and being creative and inventing things that work and are useful to people. That's the key to being a good software engineer. So let's get started here. I'll stop yammering here and let's start learning something real. Okay, so every lesson I'm going to do is going to have two parts. One, concepts. The second, actual coding. I'm going to show you something. I'm not going to inundate you with a gazillion concepts. I'm just going to cover one concept and then go straight to some code and we're going to learn something. And then there's going to be an output, like the goal, right? The thing you can demo to people and be proud of and show it off and feel like you've learned something. So that's the goal. Today, I'm going to explain how programs work, what they are, what's going on when you like type in some code and have it do something. And then we're gonna use a tool to kind of like write some actual code, and I'll do that next. So the first thing is that how does code work? What does code mean? And does it mean to write a program? Here I have a diagram that's pretty simple. I have a picture of a programmer, which is you. And what you're doing is you're writing something that your computer can understand. And that is your code. You're choosing some programming language. And that programming language is your code. It's something that makes it easy for you to understand. It's in plain English for you, right? It's when you review the code, it's simple to look at, it's simple to understand, and that's it. The second thing that happens is like how do you write an actual program? Is that when your computer takes your code that you understand and it interprets it into something called machine code. Machine code is something that the computer understands, something that it can efficiently understand and actually do the thing you want it to do. So when you take your code and you say, "Hey," your computer interprets that code, it's going to take that and convert it to a program. So this is the kind of basic concept of how to write a program. You're not just coding something. That code is something's happening to that code. It's being transformed into a program by your computer. So that's concept number one for this lesson. Okay, so second part of the lesson, we're gonna learn something. Our first program, right? We're gonna write some code and it's gonna show some output. So the language we're gonna use is Dart. There's other languages you can use to learn how to code, like Python, JavaScript, C++, C sharp. There's a lot of like programming languages out there, but for people who are interested in writing cross-platform mobile apps and having fun writing mobile apps for Android and iOS, programmers use Dart, and I'm going to use Dart because it's a very simple programming language and it has a lot of great features. And it's great to get started on learning programming. So if you want to learn another programming language later, that's fine. But Dart, I think, is a good starting point. So that's what we're going to do. So every programmer, when they start out learning a programming language, or if you're reading a book on programming, you're going to learn how to do one very, very simple thing at first. You're going to write probably a one line of code, and it's going to just show something on the screen. Um, and that's it. So let's go ahead and do that. And that's like the basic thing that will make you like feel like you've written a program, and that is a program. So let me show you what I'm talking about. First off, I'm not going to install anything on my computer. So don't go nuts installing anything on your computer, right? All the basic programs you want to write can be done on the web. You just go to a website, you write in your code, you hit the run button, and it will create a program and run that program for you right there. Okay? So we're still going to go through this flow that I'm showing you here, but it's going to be done via a web page for now. Later, we can install programming languages and write fancier programs. So what I want you to do is go to dartpad.dev. So dartpad.dev is a site that lets you just write Dart or Flutter. That's another, Flutter's something entirely different. I wouldn't get into that right now. I would just learn some basic Dart. And you can you write some code, run some programming, and show the output on the right side of the screen here. So the left side of the screen here is your code, and the right side of the screen is the output. And right now there's no output, so it's blank, right? First thing I want you to do is when you go to dartpad.dev, let me reset something here to make sure that I'm a new user. You want to say new pad, and it says discard changes. You say OK. It's gonna let you choose Dart or Flutter. I want to choose Dart. Make sure you create that, and don't select this. Make sure this is off, this HTML thing. Just say create. Okay, so that's step one. Step two, take away this code. Just don't even think about it. It's too complex, and it's just unnecessary. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to, like, we can't just write whatever code we want. We have to create something called a function. So in math, as you remember, a function is something that does something, given an input, some data, and it gives an output, right? So that's, if you remember basic math, that's what a function is. So there's a lot of like similarities of programming to math, right? Computer science and math are very much related. And I'm going to write a function here because in programming, a function is a basic mechanism that lets you do something, right? So in my program, I can't just write some code. I have to create a function, and that function will have no input right now. It doesn't have to have input, and it's not going to have any output. It's not going to output anything. It's going to do something, but that's it. So that's like one other concept to understand, that I need some function to do something in programming. Doesn't matter what programming language I'm using. And functions have a certain way of being written, right? In math, you know, I write them using parentheses, right? So if I'm writing a math function, I can say there's a special function called x%, right? Just ignore that down at the right there. X and then some parentheses, right? That's a function in math, right? We don't know what it does, but that's technically a function, right? In programming, it's pretty much the exact same way of writing it, right? So in math, if I have x is a function and I'm using parentheses here, in programming, it's the same thing. And for the computer to understand your function, to say, hey, this is my main function of my program. This is the first function I want to run in my program. I'm going to need to name that function a special name. And that special name for Dart is just called main. So in the example I gave in the math, in like math, for example, I have something called x. X can be anything. But when I write a Dart function and I want to say this is my main function that I want to run first in my application, I have to name it something special, and I'm going to name it main because that's my main function. That's the first function that runs. So that's the first lesson, right? This is how we write functions in Dart. We have a name, and then we have parentheses, and that's it. What the parentheses allow is that, going back to my diagram here, is that main with parentheses is my code. This is the left box here in my diagram. That's code. That's Dart code. That's real Dart code. But the reason why, like, for this, my computer to interpret that as an actual program, to convert it to an actual program, I need to write it in a certain way. I need to say main and then parentheses, right? I can't just write main, right? I can't just say X. I have to say main, and then I have to use start and end parentheses, right? You can put some stuff in this parentheses if you want, but we're going to learn that later. Right now, there's nothing in there. That's fine. It doesn't have any input, and that's what those parentheses represent. Those parentheses let me put input to my program. They let me define what input is going into my program. Right now, it's blank, right? Another thing is, when I code something, I have to follow certain rules, right? There's certain grammatical rules. Like when I write a sentence, like it's sunny today. Like grammar-wise, I can't not use a period. Like if I want to have this to be an actual sentence, I have to use a period, right? That's what we learn in school. I can't just say it's sunny today without a period. I mean, sure I could, but like that's not proper grammar. Same thing goes for programming. And just, by the way, those error messages down at the bottom right, just ignore that. Same goes for programming, right? I can't just say main and then a space and then write parentheses. That's just grammatically incorrect for software engineering. I will get an error. I cannot convert my program, my code into a program. The computer is going to say, sorry, I don't know what the heck you're saying. I'm not going to convert this into a program. So when I define functions, when I write my code, I have to write it in a very certain way, and it has to be grammatically correct, right? So if you know what a compiler is, I can go over that later. That's what compilers do. Compilers are like your teacher, you know, they make sure you're grammatically correct and it makes sense, right? So in another lesson, I'll get into exactly what compilers are, but maybe you've heard that term float around here and there with other videos maybe. Anyway, so when I type main, that's my first function in Dart. I can't use a space here. I have to have main immediately followed by a start parentheses and an end parentheses. Also, I can't just have a space in my parentheses. That's wrong. I can't just do this. I have to have no space there. So this is a function in Dart, but there's two things I can do with functions. One is I can like trigger a function. I can say, I want to run this function. I want to do something with this. I want to actually trigger this function. Another thing I can do is I can define the function. I can say, here's what the function does. So again, there's two things you do with a function. One is you can like run the function, like say, hey, run this function. This is my function, like run it, right? Compute this, like do something, right? You're telling the computer to do something. In this example, this is what that does. It's saying, hey, the computer's going to go line by line through this code, and it's going to see a name of something followed by no space followed by some parentheses, and it's going to be like, whoa, okay, I have to run this function. I'm going to execute this. But the thing is that we need to define what this does. And that's the second thing about functions, how to define them. How do they work? What do they do, right? So to define a function, I've already named my function. I've already defined that here's the input for the function, which is nothing. So that's why I have a start and end parentheses. I'm not defining any input. The other thing is I need to define what it does. This is how I define a function. The final part to defining a function beyond the name and the parentheses here is using not parentheses, but curly braces. And that's another like thing you need to learn, which is if I want to define what is going on in the function, I need to define the name, parentheses, i.e. what input it has, then a space, got to have a space here for it to be grammatically correct, and then curly braces, start and then curly brace. And whatever you write here is what the function does. And now, as I'm writing stuff here, you're going to see, let me move my face here for a second. You're going to see like all this garbage at the bottom right of the screen. These are errors. They're errors because the computer's complaining at you. It's like, what the heck is this? I don't know how to interpret it. Like, sorry, don't know what you're talking about. So that's like whenever you have an syntax, something like syntactically wrong in your program, or it doesn't understand what it's doing, it's going to give you an error. And that's what your computer is doing, right? That's your buddy that's telling you, sorry, I can't convert this into a program. I don't know what you're talking about, right? So let's do something where it knows what we're talking about. So what do we want to achieve here in the final part of the lesson here? As I said in the beginning, we want to just show something on the screen. That's what every programmer learns when they're starting a programming course or reading a book. They just want to show something on the screen, prove that the program worked. And the thing that they do is they will do something called print, right? Print shows something on the screen. It prints some information on the screen. So print is a term that means that just I want to show something on the screen. That's it. So the way I do that in Dart to print something is I have to call a function. There's an actual function in Dart called print, and I can just call it. And I already showed you how to call a function. Remember, we learned how to call a function and define a function. I can just call this function using the same syntax. I can just say print and then parentheses, right? But sadly, this is still not going to work because I'm going to get an error down here. The compiler is looking for something special, and the final thing that it's looking for is, well, not the final thing, but the next thing it's looking for is a special character that defines that this program is this is a thing I need to do. And that is a semicolon. So this is a grammatical, this is kind of like a period in a sentence. If I say it's sunny outside and I have a period here, the period makes that sentence like correct, right? I have to end a sentence with a period. In programming, I have to end something I want to run, some statement, with a semicolon. At least in Dart, that's what I have to use. Okay. So I need a semicolon to kind of like complete the statement. The term statement in programming is an actual term. That's an actual thing that you need to know. A statement does something in programming. So if I want to print something, I have to, if I want to call any function, I have to use a semicolon. If I want to do anything programming, I have to use a semicolon. Next thing is I have to give some input to this print function. How do I print something? What do I print? I want to print, let's say, hello, right? I want to print, let's say, hello world, right? That's what every programmer learns, by the way, in a book. They learn how to print the phrase hello world, right? So how do I provide input to the print function? You could probably assume that like it's using these parentheses here. Remember when I said that those parentheses let one define like what data goes into a function? So let's say in math, if I have a function x parentheses, if x is going to do something in math and I want to like show that I'm putting some data into that function, I can say 5, let's say, or 12, right? That's the data that goes in it to that function. Same thing for programming. If I want to put some input into the print command here, the print statement, I can write hello world. That's my input. And I want to print hello world. So the last, there's 2 more kind of syntax stuff I need to show you to get this to work, right? The syntax is how we, like the formatting we use to write computer programs, right? So that's what syntax is, right? The syntax wise, to put some input to the print statement here, I can't just write whatever I want here. I have to tell the compiler, the computer, hey, this is kind of like some English text I want to use. Some text, doesn't matter what language it's in. I want to use some letters and numbers to input into the print function. It's not going to be a number, right? The computer has to understand like I'm entering plain old like a word or a sentence or something like that. And the way we do that in Dart or in many programming languages is that we have to use a quote, right? What a quotes allow us to do is that it tells the computer, I'm just entering letters and numbers, right? So I have to write whatever English or whatever language you're using, you're into the print function. I have to wrap this in quotes. There's 2 types of quotes. I can do double quotes or single quotes. Different languages have different interpretations, but right now I'm just going to use single quotes, right? So that's what the print statement needs. If this was like a number, like if I had to enter a number, not like a letters and numbers, just pure data like numbers, let's say 12, I don't use quotes. So different types of functions receive different types of data. There's 2 different types of data. There's numbers and pure data like 12 or 5. But then there's something called strings, which is just a string of letters and numbers, right? So a string has to be wrapped with either single quotes or double quotes, right? So I want to say hello world, and that's my program. I'm done. I'm next going to hit the run button. The run button will, when you hit that run button, what's going to happen? The computer is going to take my code. It's going to make sure I have no errors in my code. It's going to make sure it understands that code. And then it's going to convert that code into a program, something that it understands. Basically a bunch of ones and zeros. It's just binary data. And then it's going to execute that program. It's going to run it, given an input. So if this is my program, there's no input to the program because the main function here has nothing in the parentheses. Remember, parentheses in a function let you define actual input. There's no input to main. It's just going to run something. It's just going to do something. There's also no output. to main also. What it's going to do is it's going to know that I'm defining main. And it's just going to go statement by statement in my program and do that thing that statement's saying I should do. There's only one statement in this program here, because I have one function I'm running and it has some input, and that semicolon is saying my statement's over. It's like the period of my sentence. And then it's going to finish the program. Like there's nothing else that's going to happen. Lastly, to recap the syntax here, these curly braces define what that function does. And then I just hit the run button, wait a few seconds, and I see in my output here, hello world. Sorry, my video is blocking hello world. Sorry about that. Hello world. What does console mean? Console is just something that shows, it just shows some output, right? It shows the output of your program. Cool. So the very last thing I want to cover here is, while this code works, there's a way we can format our code to make it more readable. And that's called syntactic style, right? This is syntactically correct. Like if I write a sentence, it's sunny outside. That's correct. Also, if I write something like this, it's sunny outside, technically that's still a sentence, right? It just is really hard to read. It's sunny outside. I don't write an email to someone with this type of syntax, even though it works. Same thing for here. This works, but it's just hard to read. So here's the deal. I want to make this syntax formatting all nice. I want to make it proper and easy to read. The way I do that is that when I define a function, after the first curly brace here, I just hit enter and I indent by a certain number of spaces. Here I'm doing 2 spaces. I'm indenting something. And then when I'm done defining my function with the final curly brace, I'm hitting enter and I'm going not indenting that final one. So it's like creating a list of something, like groceries, colon. When I want to list my groceries out, some people like to do this. Ignore all the errors on the right here. They like to do this syntax when they write a grocery list. But heck, other people want to make it even more readable. They just indent. See? And that's, I don't know, it's a little more readable, my grocery list. That's indentation. And then if I make another list here, like errands, things I want to do today, I'm going to say errands, and I'm going to do like wash the floor and take out the garbage. So this makes it easier when you have lots of lists, right? In programming, I'm going to have to indent all my code in this function. So I'm just going down 2 spaces to make it just more easily readable. But when I finish defining that function, I'm not going to indent that last curly brace. So a lot of new programmers, the main mistake they make, which is a clear sign that they don't care about formatting, which is bad, because if you have large programs, it's really hard to read large programs, and you're going to make mistakes if your code is not formatted properly. So what I mean by that is, this is wrong. It can compile, it works, the computer understands it, but it's wrong syntactically. Like it just doesn't, it's hard to read. So this is the proper syntax for defining a function. Name of the program, parentheses, whatever input you have to the program. Right now we don't worry about that. Space, the first curly brace, and then indent the rest of the code in here. And then to finish that off, another line break, hit enter. This is a line break. And then I finish my curly brace. So that's what proper formatting of a function is. There's different ways you can format this too. Other people do it differently, right? Some people do it like this. Forget that. You don't need to do that. That's just a less popular way of formatting something. But that's really important. Like formatting your code is really, really important because when it gets really large, as I said, it's important to read it easily. Cool. So we just ran our first program. We can show this off to people and say, hey, I used to not be a programmer, but now I am a programmer because I know how to write one line of code, and you should be kind of proud of that. And if you can understand in this lesson, number one, to summarize that as a programmer, I'm writing a bit of code that's understandable to me and understandable to the computer, and that computer, if I have no errors in my code, that computer takes that code and it converts it to a program. You've learned a core concept in programming on what is a program, like what does it constitute, and how do I take code and convert it into an actual program, right? So, and then finally, we wrote some code. I wrote a main function, which is a special name that Dart recognizes as the entry point to my app, like the main function that should run first. I've learned how to define a function using the parentheses and curly braces. And finally, I've learned how to call a function. And in programming, that's called invoking a function. I'm invoking a special function that Dart has provided to us called print. Print, again, is a special term in programming, and all it means is I want to just show something on the screen, some text, right? And lastly, to call that function, I want to like have a semicolon here that says this is a single statement in my program. To call that function, I have to have a semicolon because that's kind of the period to my sentence. Finally, we learned how to provide data to a function, right? In this case, we're providing something called a string. We'll learn more about strings later, but basically we wrap strings in quotes. That's it. And now that I've written this program and there's no errors showing up on the right side of the screen here, let me show you like a common error. If I go like this, doesn't know what that is. You're going to see a lot of errors. So there are no errors, not going to show anything. And then I'm going to hit run. Going to wait a few seconds. The computer is interpreting that, and it's printing something on the screen. That's it. So if you can understand these concepts and understand that we covered how to define a function and call a function, and what syntax is, you're in really good shape to go to the next lesson here. And if you're overwhelmed, just kind of be patient, right? Just this will soak into you. But these are very, very fundamental concepts, and it's really important to understand that my program not only needs to be syntactically correct without errors, it also has to be formatted and readable, easily readable as well. So thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.